You're listening to the AAF Analyzed podcast with your host, Derek Hyde and Garrett Lane.
Hello and welcome. You are listening to AAF Analyzed Week 3 Preview. As always, I am Derek Hyde. Alongside me, Garrett Lay.
Yep.
Before we get started, don't forget, if you are listening on SoundCloud, make sure you like and subscribe. If you are listening on YouTube, to also like and subscribe. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, do subscribe and leave us a review. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at AAF Analyzed to keep up with the latest news and episode release announcements and ask us questions if you want to.
And speaking of big news, if you've been keeping up with us on Twitter, you probably know this already, but we're going to go ahead and reiterate it again on the podcast. We have now joined a podcast network. It is called the Hangover Network. It can be found at hangover.network. If you just Google that, their website will show up. Through the network, we were able to update our logo into a much more professional-looking shield than the thing that Derek threw together on Photoshop. So rest in peace to the original AAF Analyzed logo. We all thought it was great. Derek, excellent job still, but we think this new logo is pretty sick.
Yeah, you're just trying to make me feel better.
That's true. I am. No, it was good, though. And along with the new logo, we also have some apparel. I tweeted out the links to the Amazon merch page where we have t-shirts. So if you happen to get one of our shirts and take a picture of you wearing it, we will certainly shout you out on the Twitter and feature you on our page, and we'll shout you out during the podcast as well. And if you wear it to a game, that would be spectacular. If you took a picture,
brownie points.
Yeah, you would have the most brownie points if you were to wear our t-shirt to a game. So that would be amazing. If you do, make sure you send us a picture, or at least let us know. You can message us on Twitter if you got one. That is sweet. We will be posting on this hangover.network website, but of course we will also still be available on all our other posting locations, SoundCloud, Apple, and YouTube as well.
We love you guys. The support has been absolutely fantastic so far, and we really want to keep it up. We've been getting some great questions so far, and without further ado, let's take it over to our question segment.
Yeah, we got asked a question on Twitter by a fella named Alex, and he just wanted to know if we missed the extra points in the AAF, and just our general thoughts on the rules. So he talks about extra points, of course. Extra points. They don't kick them anymore. You have to go for a 2-point conversion, so as we've seen, most of the time, teams are only coming away with 6 points. We did a little bit of math to find out exactly how often.
Math.
I know, math. Regarding my calculus grade, you would think this math is wrong, but it's right. It is right. I double-checked it. So we went through, we did the 2-point conversion percentages for all the teams in the league, and then the league as a whole. Currently, the hotshots are literally just blowing everyone else out of the water with their 2-point conversion percentages. They have converted 5 out of 7, which is about 71%. And in terms of relating that back to the original question of do we miss the extra points, for the hotshots, they're actually converting around probably what an extra point would be converted, considering how kicking has been going with extra points. These guys are missing, them every once in a while. So the hotshots are actually almost on par with like the average percentage for someone who's kicking an extra point. So they don't really miss it, I don't think, because they're getting those 2 points. But I got to say, I think most of the other teams in the league are missing the extra points. And they could really use that one extra point after the touchdown. The Stallions are only 2 for 4 at 50%. The Commanders are 1 for 4 at 25%. The Fleet are 0 for 2, 0% of course. The Express are 0 for 2. Apollos are 4 for 9. That's 44%. The Legends are 0 for 1. They've only had 1 touchdown, so they haven't even really gotten a chance to work on that 2-point conversion. That's 0%. And the Iron are 1 for 5 at 20%. And the league total is 13 for 34 at 38%, which is much lower than what we would expect out of extra points. So I'd say personally, I don't mind the extra points are gone, but I think if I was one of these teams, I would be missing the extra point, at least until they figure out how to get those 2-point conversions in the end zone more reliably.
Yeah, I'm personally going to agree with you there. Unless I am a fan of the hot shots or the Stallions, I don't really care that the extra point's gone, because at this point, you're either getting more points than you would have with it, or you're getting the same. So for them, it doesn't really matter, so to speak.
Yeah.
But the other situations, I do miss it. I like the fact that I've grown up on the numbers being nice multiples of 7 most of the time, with an occasional 3 mixed in there. And now, especially whenever we're trying to predict games, I'm putting in like 18 in there and like numbers that you wouldn't expect to see and just weird to type in.
Yeah, I do have to agree. I'm always thinking like, okay, so a team might get 3 touchdowns. Are they going to get 2 2-point conversions? They're probably going to get 1, so that's 12, and then we're going to go with 20, and then maybe tack a field goal on there, and we're at 23, or something like that. That's literally my thought process every single time. So it does make like the guessing of the scores a little more difficult, but I think particularly once the league gets farther down the road here, and particularly even into next season, I don't think we're going to really realize that the extra point is even gone, and it's just going to be something normal when you watch the AAF that there's no extra point. So
Yeah.
I think it's an okay change. I know these teams who can't get it can't convert the 2-point conversion, are missing those extra points, but I don't think there's really, personally for me, any reason to miss it.
Yeah, I am completely agreeing with you there. But without further ado, let's get to the actual meat of the show, and we'll go over to the game previews, starting off with Arizona at Salt Lake, Saturday, February 23rd at 3 p.m. This is the first game on BR Live, so do not fret if you do not have Bleacher Report Live. The games will still be streaming on AAF's website, and you can certainly still watch the games on there for free.
Yep. So this is a rematch of one of the best games from week 1. And as you pointed out here, Derek, it is going to be very cold in Salt Lake. The high is going to be 34 degrees. That's not totally frigid, but it's much colder than anything that Arizona has played in yet this season.
Yes, it certainly is. I've been looking at the more in-depth look at the weather, and there isn't really any chance of precipitation, so luckily there won't be any snow during the game. It's still going to be cold, and there could be wind of nearly 10 miles an hour, which certainly will not be fun to play in when it's that cold.
Yep, so I wanted to go ahead and just shout out a fan here real quick. His name is Cahill, I believe. I think that's how you pronounce it. And he sent us an email after we talked about the Stallions kicker, Taylor Bertolet.
I think it's Bertolet.
Bertolet. Yeah, that makes more sense. Anyway, he sent us a couple stats about him when we talked about how he wasn't playing that great. And because this fan here, he went to Texas A&M, and he was talking about how Taylor had only been used for kickoffs really at Texas A&M because he barely ever made a kick in the 40. He was actually really good from outside of the 40, like 45 yards and up, but he just wasn't there. So I'm actually surprised that he got the starting job for the Stallions. Now, I haven't heard much about who's going to be kicking for them next week, and I think that might be a sign that he's still going to. But if he goes 1 for 4 again this week, I do not expect to see him sticky around for very long.
Yeah, he said that basically his statistics kind of got boosted because he played in the Johnny Manziel, Mike Evans era, which would make sense. They did score a ton of touchdowns with Manziel and Mike Evans, especially those two. They had other players. So without them, maybe his numbers would be down to earth and we wouldn't see him in the AAF, but I have yet to see anything that says he won't on the team for this game. So quite frankly, I'm expecting to see him on the field.
Yeah, so once again, thank you, fans, for any sort of other info you think would be helpful to the show. We might shout you out and throw it in if you send us stuff. So that's awesome. We're going to go ahead and move into the keys of the game now. Derek, you can go ahead. Kick it off here. Yeah.
Weather. Salt Lake is the only team that isn't in the South, and it's going to be cold. Whether this helps Salt Lake because they've been preparing for the cold weather more so than the other teams, or it hurts Salt Lake because there's really not going to be that many people watching the game from their stadium because it's cold and no one really wants to be there in February.
Yeah.
Even so, it'll be a big factor.
Yeah, I did see that the Stallions are offering 2 tickets for $34 because it's going to be 34 degrees. So there might be more people at this game than you think because that is an excellent deal. Go see a football game with your friend or perhaps significant other for $17 a pop. So I think that's great. I do like, really around the AAF, teams have been doing a great job of offering up deals for tickets to get fans involved. Like the Apollos, I know they scored 40 in their first weeks. They were offering season tickets at $40 a seat per game, which is really awesome. So I think that's where the thing that Charlie talked about when the AAF started was they really want fan engagement, and I think they're doing a great job of that with ticket prices and things like that. But anyway, back to the keys of the game here. My first key to this game is going to be the return of Josh Woodrum. Will he return? And if he does, will he be fantastic? Will he lead the Stallions offense to a win? Will he play the full game and be amazing? There's so many questions, and I honestly have very few answers because we've only got to see him play a little over a little over half a game of football. So, but he looks solid. That's what I have to say. If he's back.
Quite frankly, you didn't answer any of those questions
No,
you just asked.
I answered none of them. I asked them, I answered
So you
none.
have no answers.
I have zero answers.
Let us not forget, though, that the last time Woodrum had played, he kept the Stallions to within 3 points of the Hotshots, who we have as the number 2 team in our power rankings after one half of play. With a possible Woodrum return and some more game plan to look to, the Stallions could be a surprise this week. Especially since, honestly, the Stallions were probably preparing to face Trevor Knight in that week 1 game instead of Wolford.
Yeah, I think if Woodrum can come back, if he's healthy, I know they definitely don't want to rush him back because, like we said, by what we saw in that first game, he does seem to be a centerpiece of their offense. They aren't going to want to rush him back and maybe hurt the rest of their season. But if he does play, I really think this is going to be one of the best games of the week. So, speaking of the other quarterback, will John Wolford absolutely destroy like he did in Week 1? He had a flawless game, as we remember, in Week 1. He was looking like he was going to be far and above the best quarterback in the league. But I do have to say, the last thing Wolford should do is underestimate his opponents. We saw this in the Memphis game. He did not start out very well. If he can limit the turnovers and continues to dominate with the connection between him and Ross that destroyed the Stallions secondary in Week 1, the hotshot should be sitting pretty through most of this game. But if he comes out flat-footed, things could get away from him and ugly pretty quick.
Yeah, I do want to point out, though, Wolford did come back down to earth last week. He went 14 of 22, 194 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. And I think that now that they're preparing for John Wolford to be the starting quarterback, there's actually going to be a possibility that the game plan will be more centered around him, and the Steins will actually know what they're looking for instead of basing this off of maybe 2 drives in a preseason game.
Yeah, and I think the Stallions' defense has definitely improved since that Week 1 shredding. So I do think they're going to be able to contain Wolford a little bit more this week.
Absolutely.
Speaking of the Stallions, we'll flip over to the offensive side of the ball for them. I think one of the big keys to this game is going to be the Stallions' running game. The Hotshots allowed the AAF's first ever 100-yard rusher last week against an offense that is not nearly as dynamic as the Stallions are. They're going to need similar production out of their running backs if they want a chance at this one. Woodrum might start slow if he plays, since he hasn't played in a little while, and they're going to need a solid running game to get ahead.
Yeah, the Stallions have one of the best running back games in the league with Buonio and Oliver. They've already combined for roughly 250 all-purpose yards. And although they did relatively well stopping them last time, the Hotshots, Zach Stacy found a weakness in that defense, and the Stallions could expose that weakness yet again, now that they probably know what it is.
Yeah, I can absolutely see it coming. I'm sure they've been watching a lot of tape of Stacy and the Memphis, how Memphis was calling running plays against the Hotshots, because he had a fantastic game with big carries. So I would not be surprised if both Boanyan and Oliver have great games. Now for a little bit more on the Hotshots offense, the key for the Hotshots to win this game is going to be their third downs. On the season, the Hotshots are a mere 7 for 24 on third down conversions. And against the Stallions in Week 1, they were 4 for 12. They're going to need to convert at a much better percentage if they want to win this game, because if we're noticing the Hotshots struggles on third down, I mean, obviously the Stallions coaches are. We aren't even coaches and we see this. They're going to be doing everything they can to force the Hotshots to have to work on third downs. They're going to be playing hard defense first and second down to get the Hotshots to long third downs. And if the Stallions can step up and stop them, and if the Hotshots can't figure out how to convert, the Stallions really could pull this one out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And another major thing for the Stallions, if they were to pull this one out, they have to limit turnovers. The last time that the Stallions played the Hotshots, they beat themselves up by giving away 3 turnovers compared to the Hotshots' 0. With more time to prepare and their starter back under center, they can certainly limit their turnovers and possibly create a few of their own on defense.
I could see the Stallions coming out of this game, if they get a win, moving far up in the power rankings, because we saw what they could do in week 1. Last week was rough for them, but once again, we talked about we're pretty high on Woodrum here. We think he is a solid quarterback if he can get to play. So I do think that the Stallions might really shake things up in the league after this week.
I agree.
Yep. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the players to watch for this game. My first one is going to be a Mr. Carter Schultz. He is tied for the league leader in sacks at 3. He, of course, plays defensive line for the Stallions, and he shows no sign of slowing down. Expect him to be putting a lot of pressure on Wolford, particularly if the Hotshot starting tackles don't return from injury this week. Both their left and right tackle were out last week with injury, and I believe they were limited participants in practice, at least as of Wednesday. So we're going to have to see how that turns out. If the starters are back, they could contain him, but he has looked like a dominant force off the edge, so I'd look to see him have a good game. And then my second player to watch is a Hotshots linebacker. Because I hate myself, I guess I pick really difficult names to pronounce as my players to watch. So I believe his name is pronounced Sione Tehema, maybe? That's probably totally wrong. But hey, it's my prediction that you'll be hearing the announcers say his name a lot, so hopefully they get it right. He had an excellent performance last week, boasting a sack and a forced fumble, and I see him doing well again this week and possibly popping the ball out again, as the Stallions have lost a total of 4 fumbles on the season. They have put the ball on the ground a lot, so look for Sione, or whatever it is, I apologize, to really make some plays at that linebacker position.
Yeah, you love defensive players. I love the offense.
I do.
Joel Buonio and Oliver, the Stallions' formidable runback duo, is coming in hot, and the Hotshots defense is coming in not. Both are coming off a 100-yard rushing performance. Well, Buonio and Oliver combined for 100 yards together. The Hotshots gave up over 100 yards, which sits heavily in the Stallions' favor if they were to pound the ball on the ground. Mm-hmm. And Josh Woodrum, he's coming back, and in the event he plays, he will be a critical piece for the Stallions to watch. I don't know if you should go and start him in fantasy, because in the event he re-aggravates that hamstring injury, it's not going to be a full game for your fantasy lineup.
Yep. So speaking of fantasy, potential fantasy stars for this game, I got to give mine to Rashad Ross. He absolutely shredded the Stallions secondary in week 1, put up over 100 yards and a touchdown. And while the Stallions secondary, like I said, impressed me in week 2, I just don't think they're a match for Ross, particularly if Wolford does not come out flat-footed. Look for him to have a big game.
Yep, my fantasy star for this game has to be Joel Buonio. Buonio has become a leader in carries for the Stallions team, and with the Hotshots coming off as shaky as a game that they did on the ground, gave up 175 yards just on the ground to a Memphis team that got shut out the week prior. Joel has got to have a great game, and if the Hotshots play a shaky run defense as they did, they will certainly be having a great game with Buonio.
All right, so now to wrap up this first game, we'll go into predictions. My prediction for this game is going to be Arizona 33, Salt Lake 24. I expect it to be a great game, just like we saw out of Week 1, particularly since both of these teams have now gotten 2 games under their belts. They have some film on each other. I think it's going to be another shootout, particularly like we've been harping on if Woodrum plays. But I do just think Arizona is the better overall team. I think they're going to learn from the mistakes they made against Memphis last week. So I think they're going to come out faster and stronger. I think their run game looked solid last week. They're going to come back out there with Presley, and I think it was Cook who also had a really good game. He was their leading rusher. I think that combination is going to be deadly, and I think Arizona is going to end up taking this one, like I said, 33-24.
Yeah, I'm going to change it up a little bit. I've got Arizona losing this one 20-27. Just as I thought, Arizona showed their weaknesses last game by looking down on the Express. That got shut out in week 1, and that almost ended up with them losing. However, in sub-freezing weather, run games need to be important, and the Stallions' run game impresses me more than Arizona's. Therefore, I got the Stallions winning.
I think it's going to be interesting coming out of this week because if the Stallions win, they're definitely going to move up in the power rankings. But if they lose and go to 0-3, I still think they might. I don't know how they're going to lose if they lose, but they might still be one of the strongest teams in the league despite being 0-3. So they might be above some of these teams that could pick up their first win this week. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
Yep. We both think that that'll be the best game of the week, so we're going to try and make the other previews a little bit shorter. But that one should definitely be a classic to watch.
All right, so speaking of next games, the next game for Saturday is Express at Apollos, Saturday, February 23rd at 8 p.m. This game is going to be on the Big and Bad NFL Network. So this is exciting.
Yep. It's the Sun and Gun offense, the 2-0 Apollos versus the 0-2 Christian Hackenberg-led Memphis Express. Christian Hackenberg's name in front of that really says it all.
Yeah.
Keys to this game, pretty important. The Apollos, they've been cruising. They're the number 1 team on our power rankings. Number 1 key to the game, do not pull in Arizona and look down on the Express because they can and will surprise you.
Absolutely.
The Apollos are very well coached with Steve Spurrier, and yes, I do look up to this man as a fantastic coach. But the Arizona game did show that you can be surprised by the Express if you look down on them, because Arizona was down for a majority of that game.
Yeah.
And the Express stats don't jump off the page at you except for Zach Stacy, so you just got to make sure you're prepared for all possibilities, or else you might get buried in a surprise loss.
Yeah, once again, talking about Zach Stacy, my key to the game is going to be the Memphis run game against the Apollos run defense. Once again, look for Zach Stacy to be the centerpiece of the Express offense. We haven't heard much about if Hackenberg is going to be starting again. I know Mettenberger was out of practice on Wednesday, but that was simply due to an illness. So we'll see if he would be good to go, if he might get some snaps in depending on how this game goes. The Apollos gave up a total of 175 rushing yards last week against the Commanders, who have a great running game, but I think the Memphis running game just looks more dominant right now, and they're going to have to get that number down if they want to put this Memphis team in a hole early.
Yep. One of the major things with that Memphis run game is it's looked so good that it's the only thing that Memphis has going for them, though.
Yeah.
So Zach Stacy can bust holes open in the run game, and he can punish you, but without a good quarterback, just about every team they play is going to know what's coming, which is why one of the things I'm talking about is that Memphis quarterback play. Like, all right, Memphis fans, let's be honest with each other. Christian Hackenberg is not getting the job done, and they need to change at QB as soon as possible.
We are.
But in the event that they don't change the starting quarterback, Hackenberg has to start playing like he's worth the starting position, or the Express are going to go home 0-3, which is the last thing you want to see in a 10-game season.
Yeah, that's not going to be great to go home 0-3, particularly, like I was saying, the Stallions could maybe afford to go home 0-3 here, but Memphis does not look like a team who's going to handle 0-3 very well. Flipping the script to the other side of the offense, talking about a little bit about Gilbert. I mean, more about the Memphis secondary, but how they can affect the Apollos quarterback, Garrett Gilbert. The secondary for Memphis was keyed in on John Wolford during the first half of last week's game, so it'll be interesting to see if they can pick off one of the only pickless quarterbacks left in the AAF. If they can shake Gilbert's confidence, they may have a chance by picking him off early, but they're still going to have to cover the explosive Charles Johnson and Jalen Marshall. They both looked absolutely fantastic last game. That is a lethal wide receiver duo if I've ever seen one. So that's going to be a challenge for them. Like I said, they were able to hold Wolford in check in terms of yardage, but Perez gashed them, if we remember, in Week 1. He threw for around 250 yards. So it'll be interesting to see which secondary shows up for the Express this game.
Yeah, the thing is, the Express haven't really had that many passing touchdowns thrown on them. They didn't give up a single one in the first game. They did give up 2 to John Wolford last week, but they did get 2 interceptions in the process. So their secondary hasn't been absolutely terrible. So it has the chance to shake Garrett Gilbert. But so far, Garrett Gilbert has been far and away the best quarterback in the league so far. And if he wants to hold that title, he's going to have to play through that.
Yeah.
If that Express defense plays like they did the first 3 quarters against the Hotshots, Garrett Gilbert, watch out.
Yeah, he hasn't really had his confidence shaken that much yet. It'll be interesting to see what happens to him if he throws a pick. He seems really poised in the pocket, and I think he has the best QBR under pressure right now. So I don't expect him to be shaken too much, but we'll just have to see how everything pans out.
Yeah.
Moving on to the players to watch this week. I have, for number 1 here, I have D'Ernest Johnson. There was a rough week for Akeem Hunt. Last week, he only had 2 carries for -4 yards. He had a couple receiving yards, but nothing crazy. D'Ernest will certainly be he made a statement last week. Look for him to have a solid day against a team that gave up 204 rushing yards to the Hotshots last week. But don't knock Akeem Hunt, though. He still will absolutely be getting carries for this team. The Express gave up 204 rushing yards to the Hotshots last week. So 204 rushing yards, and that was between 2 different running backs, so I wouldn't be surprised if both of these Apollos running backs have good days. My second player to watch this week is going to be a man named Channing Stribling. In case you haven't noticed, I'm a big fan of making quarterbacks my players to watch, really because I just enjoy watching good cornerbacks play because they need to be some of the most athletic guys on the football field. This Express cornerback is no exception for me. He's been the anchor of the Express secondary. He's the 3rd highest ranked cornerback right now in the league. And if they have any chance at slowing down Charles Johnson or Jalen Marshall, it's going to have to be on his back.
That's true. One of the things about D'Ernest Johnson is that he's really looking like he's going to become the starter in Orlando. So if you have Akeem Hunt, you might want to drop him. Now that I said that, Akeem Hunt will blow up. So maybe you shouldn't drop Akeem Hunt.
That's true.
But either way, picking up D'Ernest Johnson wouldn't be a bad thing. My player to watch is Christian Hackenberg. By no means am I telling you to try and start him in fantasy. But his play will determine how well the Express will play and how close they will keep it with Orlando. Therefore, that makes him a player to watch.
Yeah, it makes sense. It doesn't matter if they're going to have a good game. You've got to watch the players still because their play impacts how the game's going to go for their team.
However, a quarterback that you should be starting is Garrett Gilbert. Garrett Gilbert has been one of the best QBs so far in the league, and in my opinion, he is number 1. And if he's going to continue to hold that title, he should show out in a game against the basement-dwelling Memphis Express.
All right, my potential fantasy star for this week is Akeem Hunt. I know that's weird because I just talked about how good I think D'Ernest Johnson will do. But that doesn't mean Hunt will not have a big game. I think this is a good game for the Apollo rushing attack to grow. So starting either D'Ernest or Akeem Hunt is a great call. Both of these guys could have great games. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe even both of them end up in the end zone. And Akeem Hunt was probably going to play more of a role in the passing game than D'Ernest will. And if you're in a PPR league, that could be really nice as well.
Yep, last week proved it for the other running back in this game, Zach Stacy. Stacy is, in fact, one of the top backs in the league, and over the past 2 weeks, the Apollos have given up 255 rushing yards, which is near the bottom in the league. So this bodes pretty well for any Zach Stacy owners, and you should get excited, because even if the Express don't win, Zach Stacy should still have another good game.
I am a proud Zach Stacy owner, and will be starting him this week. So,
congrats.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited. So in terms of predictions for this game, I have the Apollos winning 30-14. I think this is going to be, as long as it doesn't end up like the Hotshots game against the Express last week where they came out slow, I think this should be a relatively easy win for the Apollos. Like you said about sitting Akeem Hunt, it's probably going to go the complete opposite way because I said it so confidently. But who knows? The Apollos just look too good on offense for really that lackluster Express offense to be able to keep up, even if their defense plays really, really well.
Yep, for my final score, I have the Express at 15, the Apollos at 27. The Express did prove last week that they have an offense but it's going to take a lot for me to pick against the Apollos. I do think that could be a possibility that the Express keep it close with their defense, but the lack of offense for the Express just doesn't make me believe anything good can happen for them. I got the Apollos winning and going 3-0.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, this is going to be in Orlando, too, so the Express don't even have that little home field advantage boost for this game.
No, they do not.
Next game that we're going to talk about here is the Iron at the Legends. That's Sunday, February 24th at 4 p.m. on CBS Sports Network.
Yep. This is the home opener for the Atlanta Legends, and it couldn't have come any sooner for them. That has yet to do anything positive for them. Quite frankly, this home game is what they need on their schedule.
Yes, it is.
The Legends offense needs to come out of its shell and play into the second quarter before they get blown out yet again for the third week in a row. And Atlanta has a pretty big social media following, so hopefully they'll have a pretty good turnout at their game.
Yeah. All right,
keys to the game, though.
Oh, we said keys to the game at the same time. That was crazy. All right, go ahead.
Number 1 for the Iron, Trent Richardson.
Exclamation point.
Yes, I do have an exclamation point there because he is that important to this game. The Atlanta defense has yet to do much of anything good for their team as of late, and the worst part of this defense is that rushing defense, which is especially bad because Kevin Coyle is supposed to be a defensive head coach. This season, the Legends have given up 322 rushing yards, which is a 161 yard per game average. And with Richardson leading the rushing game for the Iron, he's just bound to break out in this game, and you have to be watching him for the Iron.
Yeah, I'm high on Richardson this week as well. I'll talk about him a little later. Cough, cough, hint, hint, power player perhaps. But, I think he's going to have a great game. This Legends defense is not legendary in the slightest right now, so I see him having a great game. Another key to the game here that I have is, will we see Luis Perez's first ever touchdown pass in the AAF? I absolutely see it happening here. The Legends have a weak secondary, and it just feels like a quarterback as solid Perez is bound to put one in the end zone this week. That's all I have really to say about that. I think he's going to get a touchdown.
All right, bold predictions here
at
AAF Analyzed. For the next big question, though, is that Atlanta offense. Mm-hmm. We talked about it in our game recaps. They are scoring 12 points and have 0 against in the first quarter, but outside of that, they're absolutely getting blown out. They're like negative 60 points at that point.
Yeah, they have a good first drive, and then they go into an absolute tailspin. It's happened 2 weeks in a row, and they have to fix that. And unfortunately for them, this is not the ideal matchup for the offensively weak Legends, because this is a stingy Iron defense that has only given up a total of 9 points. So to see the Legends offense kicking into high gear this week would surprise me, but hey, the AAF is a league of surprises. You can convert backwards passes, so the Legends could maybe win this game.
I just really want to quickly point out, the Legends have not had an easy schedule. They've gone
they haven't.
Orlando to start, then they went to the Fleet for the first ever game in San Diego, and now they're playing Birmingham. Just not an easy start for them.
No.
Which is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
But one of the big things I'm looking for is who's playing quarterback for the Legends. The odds are that Matt Sims starts for the Legends again. But there is a common theme coming from Legends fans. You hear him out in the distance. You see him in the comments on Instagram. They're all saying, start Aaron Murray. We want Aaron Murray. Why aren't you putting in Murray? And so far, all these calls have come on deaf ears. But as I said in that Week 1 recap, the stats almost seem to favor Aaron Murray, who did drive the team down into scoring range against the Apollos at the very end of that 40-6 blowout.
Yes, he did.
So Kevin Coyle was smart at this point. You have nothing to lose. Just throw Aaron Murray in, see if he sinks or swims, and go from there. You really don't have anything to lose in your first home game.
That's true. They might as well switch up quarterback at this point. They're already 0-2. Things aren't looking great for that offense. It's been pretty stagnant. This is a great defense they're playing, which might make you want to keep Aaron Murray on the bench maybe one more week too, so that he doesn't get thrown into the wood chipper here, because this Iron defense is terrifying. But who knows? We'll have to see how things shape up for the Legends this week.
Certainly.
My player to watch this week, is going to actually be for the Legends, though. It is Akram Wadley. He is a dynamic and shifty player. He had a great screen catch last week that he took for around 30 yards. He's going to be Matt Sims' go-to check down route when everyone else is covered or there's an iron curtain in his face. So he actually might be a bright spot on this Legends offense this upcoming game.
Yep. I'm really watching the Legends defense just to see how well they can hold the pretty good Iron offense. This could end up being a defensive battle because the Iron aren't necessarily a team that score a lot of points. So we'll really see who has the better defense, but the Iron's offense is just better, which really makes me lean towards the Iron.
Yeah, speaking of scoring points, we'll go into our potential fantasy stars for the week. My first one is going to be Younghoe Koo. If anyone's going to be scoring for this Legends offense, it's going to be this guy. He has almost all their points except for their one touchdown. He's been solid on field goals. I could see him coming away with, I have them scoring 12 points this week. Spoiler alert there. And I could see him scoring all 12 of those points. So don't be afraid to start Younghoe Koo at kicker. And then for my other fantasy star, it's going to be Louis Perez. This Legends defense is weak, so I'm going to say this is the game that Perez really shines, really comes into his own, and like I said, throws that elusive first touchdown pass.
I'm also going to stick with the Iron offense. Trent Richardson is a potential fantasy star for me. This season, the Legends have given up 161 rushing yards a game, as I said earlier, and Richardson's averaging nearly 20 carries a game, so he's just bound to break out. If you have him, there's no way you can sit him this week of all weeks.
Yeah.
And also on the Iron offense, wide receiver Quentin Patton. The Iron receiver didn't really have a stellar game last week when I had him as a fantasy start, but he was still targeted 7 times and appears to be the favorite target of Perez. So look for him to break out against a defense that is yet to give up less than 300 all-purpose yards in a game.
So the predictions for this game here, I have the Iron winning 24, the Legends 12. I still think it's going to be a relatively low-scoring game. The Iron haven't had a super explosive offense like some of the other top teams in the league, but I do think they're going to get in the end zone a couple times. And the Legends, like I said, I think Younghoe Koo might come away with all 12 of their points here, kicking 4 field goals. But they absolutely could prove me wrong.
I have a really similar thought of how this game's going to go. I have the Iron scoring 22, the Legends 9. Other than the Iron being a low-scoring team and the game being in Atlanta, there's really nothing that Atlanta has an advantage over the Iron on. And even so, the Iron are a low-scoring team, so are the Legends. Neither team really has a big offense, and Atlanta doesn't have an offense once the first quarter ends in the first place. And with Matt Sims most likely being under center for the Legends, nothing has drastically changed to prove to me that the Legends are a better team from week 2 to now, so I just have to go with the Iron.
Yep, these seem like pretty safe picks here. But hey, we see a weakness in the Legends, and we're going to take advantage of it. I got to catch up to Derek in these picks here. So, for the final game of the weekend, we have the San Antonio Commanders at San Diego Fleet, Sunday, February 24th at 8 p.m. This is once again on NFL Network, and the Commanders will be enjoying their very first away game. They will no longer be playing in that roaring Alamo Dome that has had over 25,000 people attend both weeks.
Yep, and this could be a really packed house for San Diego, as unlike last time, there is no reason to believe that there will be a torrential downpour in the San Diego area this Sunday, making passing the ball a possibility and a full stadium for San Diego also a possibility. They've missed professional football, and there's probably some people who didn't want to come out in the rain, and I'm sure that they'll show up this week.
I'm sure it also helped that they won that last game, so they really definitely got the attention of San Diego. Or as they say in Anchorman, San Diego. I won't repeat the rest of the line because this is a children's show.
Okay. Keys to the game.
But if you know, you know. You know what San Diego means in German.
Oh, man. Keys to the game, the quarterback matchup. Now that the Fleet have officially changed quarterbacks and made Philip Nelson the starter, unlike Mike Bercovici, who was the starter against the Commanders week 1, there were no passing touchdowns the last time that these teams played for either team. So this game, both teams will make a point to improve on their passing offenses, and with Nelson under center, I'm going to give the Fleet a better chance to score through the air. Nelson on the season, he's only got 47.5 completion percentage, 210 yards, and 2 picks, which isn't that great. But if you compare it to Logan Woodside, the starter for San Antonio, he's thrown around the same completion percentage at 50.7. He has double the yards, but he's also played double the snaps, and he has 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. So on paper, these quarterbacks are relatively similar. Mm-hmm. And last week, the Commanders did give Marquise Williams a drive or two at starting quarterback, and he was basically a glorified running back, running the ball more than he passed, and that the Fleet are really good at covering the run, which is something that'll really play well into their hands.
Yeah, speaking of the Fleet covering the run and overall being well on defense, can this Fleet defense make a statement? Their defense has given up the second fewest points in the league through week 2, and this defense is going to have to play lights out against a Commanders team that has a very solid offense. They already played once, like we know, week 1. They allowed only 15 points to the Commanders that week, but the Commanders' offense is looking far stronger than it did in that first game. Considering the one strength of the Fleet's offense is their rushing attack, and the Commanders held the Apollos to only 88 yards on the ground, the only way I can see the Fleet winning this is if they absolutely own the defensive side of the ball.
Yep. The Fleet defense has really improved, and so has the Fleet offensive line. Another thing that I want to bring up. In week 1, that Fleet offensive line got absolutely torched. That led to multiple big hits, Mike Bercovici getting famously crushed on national television, and 6 sacks total. However, in week 2, that Fleet line did tighten up, and they only gave up 3 sacks. And the weird thing happened where it only appeared that Bercovici gets sacked a lot by the opposing team. In the preseason, he got sacked something like 7 times, which is ridiculous. Then he got sacked around 6 times in week 1. But once they took him out, the Fleet offensive line didn't appear to give up as many sacks, which could be Bercovici holding the ball too long, or maybe the Fleet O-line just doesn't like him.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility as well. I could really see that.
That's most likely not the possibility there. However, limiting turnovers is a big thing that needs to happen in this game. The last time that these teams played in week 1, they combined for 5 total interceptions, 2 by the Fleet and 3 by the Commanders. The team that threw more interceptions in that game ended up winning, and I'm not really expecting that to happen this time.
No, that'll be interesting, though it also points to maybe in fantasy you might want to start one of the defenses, either the Commanders or the Fleet. Actually seemed like a solid start. That week 1 game was low scoring. There were a lot of turnovers, so your defense could accumulate some solid points. Now on to the players to watch for this game. I'm going to have Jaquan Gardner. He's not my player to watch because I think he's going to have a good game. I'm actually boldly predicting that he might not play that well. But because the Fleet's success is going to have to hinge on how well Gardner runs the ball, that's why I really think that he is a player to watch. This Commanders' offensive line or defensive line is really, really strong against the run, so it might be difficult for the Fleet to get anything going on offense. But if they do, it's going to have to go through Gardner.
Bold prediction. You couldn't be more wrong.
It is a bold prediction. And my second player to watch is a defensive player, and he is for the Commanders, Joey Mbu, I believe. The Fleet O-line had a solid week last week, but Mbu is a force. He's currently the PFF_AAF on Twitter's top-graded defensive tackle and has been in the quarterback's face almost constantly. He has a decent number of tackles for loss. He's always putting pressure on the opposing quarterback, so look for him to be a big body in the trenches this game.
All right, will do.
That's right. Look for him.
Potential fantasy stars. Jaquan Gardner is my potential fantasy star. You are nuts because you think that he is not going to be a good start this week.
I don't know.
The Fleet offense banks on this guy's success to do well, and in week 1, Gardner had 55 yards on just 8 carries against the Commanders. That's a 6.9-yard average.
Okay.
And he's only
they had
going
no film
to get,
on him, but okay.
He's only going to get more carries this week. And now that Martz knows how good Gardner is, he's going to get so many more touches than 8, and he's going to get so many more yards than 55, and you can expect him to break that 100-yard mark. I'm already going to say that right now.
Ooh, this is the first really big controversy on AAF Analyzed, I think. Really different predictions here. So, Garrett, that is me. I'm saying he won't play well. Derek, that is him, says that he's going to break 100 yards. So keep track of what's going on, fans, and then tweet at us who you think is going to be right, perhaps. See who is Team Garrett and Team Derek on Jaquan Gardner this week. And my potential fantasy star is going to be Mikhail McKay. He had a total of 12 targets in that first game when they played the Fleet. He had 5 receptions for 80 yards against them, like I said, in week 1. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up finding the end zone this game to add to a solid stat line. So I would definitely put him in your starting lineup.
Yeah, Mikhail McKay is a dangerous wide receiver, no doubt about it. And he is probably either the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver in the league, along with John Ross. It's just, he's been having a great year.
Rashad Ross.
No, well, yeah. Both of them.
Yeah, both of them. Anyway, now onto the predictions for this final game of Week 3. I have the Commanders beating out the Fleet 25-17. I do think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a pretty sweet defensive battle here. I think Jaquan Gardner is going to be limited, but he might end up in the end zone once, maybe on a short run. So I can see him possibly, like I said, getting into the end zone. But I do think the Commanders are going to edge out the Fleet, even though the Fleet have that home field advantage in San Diego.
And my prediction is the complete opposite. I have the Commanders scoring 17 and the Fleet scoring 22. In my personal opinion, the main reason that the Fleet lost week 1 is because of Berkovici. And with Nelson under center, I think that gives the Fleet just enough danger to open up the running game, even more so for Jaquan Gardner to have a great game. And because of this, the home field atmosphere, and no bad weather in San Diego, I'll take the Fleet to split the series against the Commanders and win at home.
Well, I think we have a very exciting weekend of football ahead of us because some of us, we could be totally wrong. And you could embarrass me, I could embarrass you, who knows? But it looks like it's going to be a great week for AAF football once again. We're going to go ahead and wrap this episode up with our fantasy football talk. So we have first our plugs for the week. My plugs for the week are going to be Joel Boa. How do you say it? I can't say it. It's
Buonyo.
Buonyo. I can't get a hang of it. Joel Buonyo / Brandon Oliver. If you have either of them, I'd put them in your lineup. Both had great games last week despite splitting carries, and I see similar production coming this week with perhaps both of them getting a touchdown.
Yep, one of my plugs has to be Trent Richardson. That Atlanta defense is yet to do much of any good for the team as of late. And this season, the Legends have given up again 322 rushing yards, 161 yards a game. And with Richardson leading that rushing game for the Iron by a landslide, he's just bound to break out, and you have to play him. And secondly, Mikhail McKay, the number 1 wide receiver for San Antonio. He's getting way too many targets to pass up, and he absolutely torched San Diego in week 1. You got to start him again in week 3 because he's bound to have another week just like that unless something drastically changes in that secondary.
I agree with you totally. On these next ones, I do not. For our passes for the week, I have, boldly once again, Jaquan Gardner. The Commanders have an excellent run defense with no passing game to be found in San Diego currently. The Commanders are going to smell the run most of the time, and I firmly believe that Jaquan Gardner should be passed on this week. Probably going to get totally embarrassed, but I'm going to pretend to be confident here and say that's what's going to happen.
My honorary plug of the week is Jaquan Gardner. And player I should pass on, Jarrell Presley. Presley is slowly but surely starting to share the spot as the number 1 back in Arizona with Tim Cook. That's Arizona.
Yeah.
And along with the Stallions giving up 0 rushing touchdowns to the Hotshots the last time they played, makes me really want to pass on Presley because Tim Cook has taken over that number 1 spot.
Yeah, I do agree with that one. I think the fact that Presley's really sharing these carries with Cook is not a great sign for him. Finally, we have our power players. I hinted at him earlier, and my power player for the week is going to be Trent Richardson. The Legends got absolutely played by Gardner last week. It's going to happen again. Start Richardson. He's going to have a great week.
Yep. You had already put down Trent Richardson, or else I would have made him my power player. So I'm going to go with my number 2 option, which is still a fantastic option, Garrett Gilbert. Garrett Gilbert has been nothing short of incredible so far, and since he is against the 7th best team in our eyes, I have to see Garrett Gilbert as my power player. He's been fantastic with Steve Spurrier, and only great things to come for that Apollos offense.
I agree with that. I think Gilbert is also going to have a sweet game this week. Well, that's all we have for this week's game preview. Thank you so much for listening. We have a very exciting weekend of football coming up with some bold predictions from both Derek and I. So don't forget about our Monday recap that will be, of course, coming out on Monday, where we get to see who is right, who is wrong, and who has to cry real tears because they are terrible at predicting what happens in the AAF. Who knows what's going to happen? Hopefully me. I can't wait to cry on air. Anyway, thank you once again for listening. We had a great time talking to your ear holes, and peace out and play football.
Thank you for listening to the AAF Analyzed podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at AAF Analyzed, and feel free to contact the show to have your questions featured on a future episode. And don't forget to check out the show on all other platforms such as iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube.